So today is the first lesson where we are going to start to make our clay sculpture. The clay sculpture is going to test your ability to make the proportions in clay, stick to those proportions, and model the various facial features. And then you are going to be looking at your gridded enlargement, and for homework you are going to be doing your gridded enlargement, and for classwork you are going to be doing your clay model. And the picture, of course, which was taken of you, is going to help you. So the first thing to do is make sure your sleeves are rolled up and your tie is tucked in so you don't get clay on your clothing. You're going to get a piece of clay which we're going to use for our modelling, and you're going to need to have a number of tools. Now there are a variety of pottery tools. Some have flat ends, some have pointed ends, some have ends which you can actually are quite sharp and you can cut with them, and of course there are pottery knives, so you can also cut with the pottery knife. So the first thing to do is take your clay shape and cut it into the size you want, which is obviously an oval shape. I'm going to just flatten this a little bit so it's even. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tap the edges, to curve the edges down, to round the edges like the side of the face. I'm doing this on the table initially. Now obviously it's still not an oval, so the next thing to do is hold it and start to tap it very gently, because if you go too far or too hard you're not going to get the right shape. So that's going to be the top of my head. So the bottom, where the chin goes, is narrower. So I need to tap that in a little bit harder. So it's starting to round. So it's still quite square from the side. So I need to just tap it and put it back down and make it a little bit rounder on the edges. Bit more. So that's starting to look quite oval. So if we look at the oval shape in our diagram and in our drawing, the oval is relatively good. If you look at the sides could have a bit curved bits of clay which are a bit messy, or a few kind of things like that. Those can be smoothed over at the end. This can be smoothed over either with your fingers or with a pottery tool. There's no right tool to use for certain things. You use tools which you find work for you. The best tool in most circumstances is actually a dry finger. So take your time, have a look at it. So when you're happy, the next thing to do is go back and think about the proportions. So we know that halfway down, measure it with a ruler, or you can do it approximately with eye. Very light line. I'll press a little bit harder because you can see it on the video, and then we'll do another line which is our center line, because of course the face is symmetrical. You would have guessed already that the eyes go on this line. So first thing to do is the eye sockets. So what you want to do carefully, either with your fingers or not too close together because the nose is going to come here. You want to put in the eye socket. If you feel where your eyes go in, and then the cheeks come around there, and they kind of curve up the top a little bit for the eye socket. Don't go too deep. I'm probably going down about 1/2 centimetre. Remember with clay, if you do too much, you get yourself in trouble. If you don't go too deep, you can always go deeper. But if you go too deep, you can't undo it. So, I've got my eye sockets. And I know my nose is going to become, the bottom of my nose is going to be about 1/3 of the way down there. And I know my mouth is going to be modelled there. Smooth that out one more time. Check the surface. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the eyes. So get yourself a bit of extra clay. Don't need much at all. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a ball. So I think it's about the right size. That obviously looks a little bit big to me. So I'm going to cut that in half. I'm going to roll a ball. That looks about right. So I can do one of two things. I can either take it and cut my ball in half, which obviously might change the shape slightly, so we need to be quite careful and decide where those two bits are going to go, and if they stick out a bit far or are too close together. Now when you're happy, I think they stick out a bit too far, so I'm going to squash them a little bit. So when you're happy, the only way to join two pieces of clay is to rough up the backs. So there's my two pieces of clay. I'm going to take my knife, do a little bit of cross hatching. Again, little bit of cross hatching. Just like fine drawing skills, you have to be incredibly careful. With fine modelling skills, you have to be even more careful. So you effectively glue these two pieces together with wet clay. So wet clay is effectively clay which has been left to go dry and then add quite a bit of water to it. So it turns into quite a creamy paste. This clay is called slip. Okay, it's quite slippery, so I'm going to put a little bit in there and a little bit in there. Don't worry if you put too much. And then I'm going to push that into the wet clay, and I'm going to push that one into the wet clay. Now when this clay dries, you'll be able to smooth it out with a pottery tool or your finger, but it's pointless trying to do it when it's wet. The little details like eyebrows and pupils in the center of the eye, you might want to wait until later to put those in, but sometimes little features like that help to come together. And if you've done that probably for the first lesson, you've probably done pretty well. Next lesson we'll talk about the nose and the mouth, and then obviously we move on and we put the features on, such as ears, hair, etc., and start to model the cheeks and things like that. And I suppose the last thing I'm going to do, because I don't need this line up there anymore, I'm going to try and smooth that out so it disappears.